I never thought much about school lockdowns. Back then, they always felt like rehearsals, drills for some distant nightmare that could never actually touch us. The announcements, the dimming lights, the hushed shuffle of desks being dragged against doors, it was more inconvenience than fear. But that changed during my junior year of high school. That was the year I discovered what real dread feels like. It was a Friday. I remember that detail clearly, because everyone had been buzzing about the weekend football game. The school hallways smelled faintly of cafeteria pizza, and students were louder than usual, voices bouncing through the lockers as if freedom was just hours away. I had my fifth period lunch followed by astronomy. Astronomy was held in one of the two classrooms down in the basement. The basement was an odd part of our school. It didn't look like it belonged. The rest of the building was busy, open, echoing with footsteps and chatter. The basement was quiet, a little too quiet. The walls down there were narrower, the ceilings lower. No intercoms, no PA system, just a single plain hallway with two classrooms and a bathroom at the end. Students jokingly called it the chamber. Some loved having classes there. It was cooler, more private, and the teachers assigned to those rooms tended to be lenient. But there was always something off about that hallway. I'd learned to ignore the feeling. At least until that day. We had a quiz in astronomy. I finished early, maybe 10 minutes in. The teacher gave me a nod as I slid the paper onto her desk. I pulled out my phone and texted my friend JJ, who was in the other basement classroom. Me. Bathroom? JJ. 2 minutes does. I left the classroom and walked into the basement hallway. That silence was immediate, like stepping into another world. My footsteps echoed louder than they should have. Even the hum of the school above sounded muted, smothered. I waited in the bathroom, leaning against the sink until the door creaked open and JJ slipped inside. We laughed, we messed around, killing time the way bored kids did. Then JJ's phone buzzed. He read the text and frowned. Lockdown, he said. At first we grinned. Lockdowns meant we'd scored a break from class, and being in the basement gave us an alibi if we were caught outside. Nobody expected us to hear the announcements down there. Want to check it out? JJ asked, eyes gleaming with mischief. I hesitated but followed. We climbed the short set of steps that led from the basement door to the main floor. The moment we pushed through, I knew something was different. The lights were off, not just dimmed, off. The hallway stretched into near darkness, broken only by the faint daylight bleeding in through the glass doors at the far end of the lobby. Usually during lockdowns, the light stayed on. But this felt wrong. The air was still, silent. The kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums. JJ stepped forward. Yo, this is wild. I grabbed his arm. Something's not right. That's when JJ froze. Wait, he whispered, staring down the hallway. Who's that? I followed his gaze. From the shadows at the far end, a figure was emerging. At first I thought it was a teacher, but as the man stepped closer, my stomach dropped. He wasn't dressed like any teacher or staff member I'd ever seen. His clothes were ragged, layers of dirt ground into the fabric. His posture was slouched, his walk uneven, almost dragging one leg behind him, and then he stopped. Directly under one of the ceiling lights, his face finally visible. It wasn't the face of someone who belonged in a school. Sunken cheeks, greasy tangled hair, eyes wide, darting between us like a predator sizing up prey. Go, I hissed at JJ. We bolted back through the basement door, slamming it shut behind us. Both classroom doors were already locked, lights off. We couldn't risk pounding on them. It would give us away. The bathroom. It was our only choice. We shut the bathroom door, flipped the light off, and crouched in the farthest stall. The darkness was suffocating. My heartbeat felt so loud I was sure it could be heard through the walls. For a moment, there was nothing. Just silence, and then the bathroom door creaked open. Light spilled in from the hallway. Just a thin sliver at first, stretching across the tiles. Then the door clicked shut, plunging us back into darkness. I held my breath. JJ gripped my arm so hard it hurt. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, each one tapping against the tile like a countdown. And then, breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing. Too close. The sound hovered just outside our stall, uneven and wet as though the man had been running. Or worse. JJ leaned close to whisper. His voice was barely audible, but in that silence it might as well have been a shout. We have to crawl out. The breathing stopped, a hand pressed against our stall door. The metal latch rattled once. Then again. Then came a sudden violent bang, the man slamming his weight into the door. "Go," I whispered. We dropped to the floor and scrambled under the divider into the next stall. The tiles scraped against my knees, my palms slick with sweat. The banging grew louder, faster, furious. We kept crawling, stall after stall, until we reached the far end of the bathroom. Finally, we burst out, scrambling to our feet. The man was there, standing in the corner. The only light in the room flickered from the hallway behind him, enough to reveal his silhouette. His head tilted just slightly as if studying us, and then, I swear I saw it, something glinted at his hip. A gun. We pounded on JJ's classroom door. The teacher cracked it open, panic flashing in her eyes. She yanked us inside and locked it again immediately. JJ gasped out the story while the teacher pulled down the blinds and motioned for us to crouch against the wall. I remember her whispering, her voice trembling, "He has a weapon." The students in the corner were pale, silent, their eyes locked on us as though we had dragged the danger inside. Then came the bang. This time not against a stall door, against the classroom door itself. The man's shadow stretched across the window. His face appeared pressed against the glass, grinning as he jiggled the doorknob. The students whimpered, a couple of girls crying into their sleeves. The man slammed the door once more. And then, silent seconds ticked by like hours. We heard his footsteps fade down the hallway back toward the stairs. We stayed in that room for over an hour. Nobody moved. The teacher whispered questions, but my mind was numb. I could still hear that heavy breathing in the dark, still see the tilt of his head, the way his grin spread as if he enjoyed our terror. Eventually, an announcement came through. The lockdown was lifted. Police escorted us out in single file, guiding us past clusters of officers in the lobby. I told them what I saw, what we heard. JJ added the detail about the gun. The man was never caught. Not then, not ever. The school installed cameras after that, raised the security budget. But no explanation was ever given. No news reports, no articles. It was as though the whole thing had been swallowed up, erased. And yet, years later, I can still feel it. That silence in the basement. That breath on the other side of the stall. That grin pressed against the glass. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I wonder what would have happened if JJ hadn't whispered. If we had stayed quiet in the dark, holding our breath, would the stall door have held? Or would he have found us, crouched on the floor with nowhere left to run? I spent over 20 years as a police officer in New Jersey. Most of those years I thought I'd seen it all. Domestics, shootings, suicides, missing persons, overdoses. You get hardened, numb, detached. But some calls never leave you. They bury themselves in the back of your mind, resurfacing when you least expect it. For me, that call was a school lockdown. It happened on a stormy afternoon. The sky was heavy with rain clouds, the kind that make everything look gray and colorless. The wind was so strong it rattled the traffic signs as I drove. I remember the dispatch coming over the radio, sharp and urgent. Unit 14, respond to a lockdown in progress. Suspicious male entered through the rear gym doors of the middle school. Possible weapon. I didn't hesitate. I flicked on my lights and sirens and sped down Route 47. Tires hissing against wet asphalt. Lockdowns were rare enough, but possible weapon was the phrase that made your gut twist. You never knew if you were walking into a drill, a prank, or something out of a nightmare. When I pulled into the school's back lot, the rain had just started, tapping against the roof of my cruiser. Parked crookedly near the gym doors was a white van. Older model, no windows on the back, just a pair of dented doors and rust along the bumper. The van was empty. Locked tight. I should have written down the plate number. God help me, that's still my biggest regret. I unholstered my flashlight and stepped into the school through the rear gym entrance. The air inside was instantly colder. The main lights were off, plunging the halls into darkness. My boots echoed on the tile, the only sound apart from the faint whistle of wind slipping through cracks in the old building. My hand hovered near my holster as I advanced. Flashlight beam cutting across lockers and classroom doors. That's when a woman appeared from the shadows of the front office. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. She whispered, "He went into the boys' locker room. Please, be careful." I radioed for backup. The dispatcher's voice came back calm, steady. "Backup en route. Hold position until assistance arrives." But waiting felt impossible. Every instinct screamed at me to move. I knew kids were somewhere in this building. silent, huddled in classrooms, praying the doors would hold. If the suspect had a weapon, every second counted, so I moved. Against training, against procedure. I moved. The boys' locker room was just down the hall, a heavy metal door tucked beside the gym. I pressed my ear against it. Silence. Then, the faintest sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Something scraping against metal. I pushed the door open slowly, my flashlight sweeping across rows of lockers. The air inside was stale, tinged with the sour smell of sweat and mildew. The main vents hummed overhead, but beneath that hum came something else, a series of small, irregular dings, like fingers tapping on locker doors. I should have announced myself, called out police, made it clear someone was there. That's what protocol demanded. But my throat was dry, my mouth locked. Instead, I crept forward, my flashlight beam bouncing off the dented metal of the lockers. Every time I turned, the noise shifted, always ahead of me, always just out of reach. I was in the far corner of the room when it happened. A sudden slam. One of the lockers crashing shut somewhere deeper in the football team's section of the locker room. The sound jolted through me like electricity. I raised my voice finally, hoarse and shaky. Police! Identify yourself. For a second, nothing. Then a voice, high-pitched, terrified. Help! I'm in here! I sprinted toward the sound. A boy's fist pounded against the metal door of one of the large football lockers. His voice was muffled but frantic. Please! Get me out! I rattled the handle. Locked. I cursed under my breath, shining the light inside through the narrow vent. I could see movement. A boy's terrified eyes, wet with tears, staring back at me. Stay calm, I barked. I'll get you out. He shook his head violently, whispering through the slats. He's here. Don't. But before I could respond, another sound froze me, the squeak of shoes on tile. Behind me, I spun around, gun raised, flashlight slicing through the dark. Nothing, just rows of lockers, but I swear I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps retreating deeper into the shadows. I felt something cold settle in my chest. He was in here with me. I travel a lot for work. Different cities, different hotels. The same bland beige rooms that all blur together after a while. Usually I don't mind, it's part of the job. But one trip in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic lockdowns, changed the way I look at hotels forever. It was a Tuesday night. The world was quiet back then, almost eerily so. Airports were empty, roads were bare, and hotels ran at half capacity. When I checked into the downtown Marriott, the parking lot was nearly deserted. Only a few cars were scattered under the flickering floodlights. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of bleach. The clerk behind the counter wore gloves and a mask, eyes red with exhaustion. He barely looked up as he slid my keycard across the counter. 7th floor, he mumbled. Room 714, I took the elevator up. The halls were dim, with half the lights off to save energy, according to a sign taped near the vending machine. My footsteps echoed on the carpet as I walked to my room. The only sound in that long, empty corridor. When I unlocked the door, the room looked normal at first glance. 2 queen beds, a desk, a TV, and a closet with a mirrored sliding door. Standard Marriott layout, but the air inside felt wrong. Heavy, stale. Like someone had been breathing in there just a moment before I entered. I set my bag down, peeled off my mask, and tried to shake off the unease. Maybe I was just tired. I turned on the TV for background noise and cracked open a soda from the minibar. But as I sat on the bed scrolling through my phone, I heard it. Click soft. Subtle. The unmistakable sound of a closet door shifting slightly on its track. I froze. My eyes went straight to the mirrored closet across the room. The door stood still, reflecting the room back at me. For a second, I convinced myself it was the building settling, or maybe the AC kicking on. Then it happened again. Click. Like fingers pressing against the inside of the glass, the hairs on my arms stood on end. I grabbed the hotel phone and dialed the front desk. Hey, does housekeeping have access to occupied rooms at night? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. The clerk sounded confused. No, sir. Once you're checked in, only you have access. Why do you ask? I hesitated, staring at the closet. No reason. Just curious. But deep down, I knew it wasn't no reason. Something was inside that closet. I tried to distract myself, turning up the TV volume and pretending everything was fine. Hours dragged by. Midnight came and went. My eyelids grew heavy, but every time I started to drift off, I swore I heard it. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing coming from the closet. Finally, at around 2 a.m., I'd had enough. I slid out of bed, phone flashlight in hand, and crept toward the closet. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard it hurt. I reached out, grabbed the cold metal handle, and yanked the mirrored door open. Nothing. The closet was empty. Just a few wire hangers swinging slightly as if disturbed moments ago. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. "Get a grip," I muttered. "You're losing it." I shut the closet, locked the deadbolt on the door, and forced myself back to bed. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of my hotel phone ringing. Groggy and irritated, I picked it up. "Hello?" Silence, then faintly a voice whispered, "Don't look in the closet again." The line went dead. My stomach dropped. I stared at the phone in disbelief, heart hammering. Maybe it was a prank? Maybe someone dialed the wrong room? But then my eyes drifted toward the closet. The mirrored door was open, not fully, just a crack a few inches wide. Wide enough for someone to watch me through the gap. I froze, paralyzed with dread. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to grab my bag, run out, get the hell out of that room, but I couldn't. I was rooted in place, staring at that narrow black void inside the closet. And I swear to God, I saw it, a pale hand, long-fingered and motionless. Resting against the doorframe, I snapped. I lunged for my bag, yanked the zipper open, and pulled out the small pocket knife I always carried when traveling. My hand shook violently, but I pointed it at the closet door. "Who's in there?" I shouted, voice breaking. "Come out now." Silence. I crept closer, knife trembling in my grip, and yanked the closet door open again. Empty. No hand. No person. Just shadows stretching across the floor. But on the carpet inside, something new caught my eye. A shoe print. Fresh. Damp. Like someone had stepped inside after coming in from the rain. That was it. I grabbed my bag and bolted. I didn't care if I looked insane. I wasn't staying in that room another second. I pounded down the hallway, pressed the elevator button a dozen times, then decided screw it and took the stairs. My pulse was so high I thought I'd pass out. When I reached the lobby, I slammed my bag on the counter and told the clerk, "Someone's been in my room. I'm not going back up there." The clerk frowned, confused. "But that's impossible. We haven't checked anyone else onto your floor all night." I demanded another room. He gave me one on the second floor, far from the seventh. I barely slept, but at least I survived the night. The next morning, as I was checking out, I saw two cops speaking with the manager. Curious, I lingered nearby. One of them asked the manager, "You said this is the third complaint from room 714 this month?" The manager nodded nervously. "Guests keep reporting noises, seeing things, closets opening by themselves. But every time we check, nothing's there." The cop scribbled something in his notebook and asked, "And that's the room where—" The manager cut him off quickly when he noticed me listening. He forced a smile, waved me toward the door, and said, "Thank you for staying with us, sir. Safe travels." I never did find out what happened in room 714. But sometimes late at night I think about that phone call, that whisper, "Don't look in the closet again," and I wonder, what would have happened if I had?